Om Jnanatirmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chaksurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna
Jai Om Vishnupad Padamhansa Pariprajapacharya Ashtotar Sri Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Miraj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Nama Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sakaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Kund Radha Kunikiri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Ki Jai Gangamayi Ki Jai Jamanamayi Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande Hari Hari. Welcome to all, the few, the brave. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Jaina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Pistam Stapitam Jaina Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mahyam Dadati Shapadantikam Vande Hang Shri Guru Shri Jatapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Shagrajat Raganatan Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Virijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakhan Vitanscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagat Pate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kam Shana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Vodipriye Vansha Golpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindho Pyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namo Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Again, welcome to all, and we're broadcasting, at least from my corner, from Deland, where devotees are gathering to honor His Holiness Bhakti Charamaharsh on the first anniversary of his disappearance. And I wonder what thoughts or questions thoughts or questions might be bubbling up today.
I had a couple of thoughts and maybe even questions, but wait to see.
I think your volume's pretty low, Kendra Prabhu.
Oh, I had it turned down because of the drum.
Okay, now you're good.
That's that better?
Mm-hmm.
I had a couple of thoughts maybe that I would love to hear you speak on if you would so choose. I was reading a conversation that, a very heated conversation that this is during the early days of the Bombay project. And Prabhupada was speaking with Gargamuni and Tamal Krishna Maharajas. And the both of them were arguing with Prabhupada that they're wasting their time in India, that they should go back to the West and preach, that they don't belong there. And Prabhupada was very sternly saying, but I want you here. This is my mission. And they were going back and forth and relating the story. Giri Raj Maharaj says he was shocked to see such a heated debate between his godbrothers and Prabhupada. He had never seen it before.
Mm.
And at one point, Prabhupada just gave a dismissive wave of his hand and sat back and said, all right, do whatever you want. Chant 16 rounds, follow the 4 regulative principles, and do whatever you want. And it really made me think that at that time, it was very clear that, at least it seems to me to have been clear, that to be a member of ISKCON, to be a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, meant that you were on board to be part of his mission, which was very clear. And you could, and that's what it meant to be a devotee. And it seems to me that it may not be so clear now, that we don't perhaps share such a strong sense of mission as a large worldwide community of devotees. And one of my friends was saying about the history of ISKCON as far as he has seen it, that I think he was actually quoting Winston Churchill, something about World War II. He was saying, this is not the beginning of the end, but it is the end of the beginning, in terms of the era that we're now witness to. And I just wonder if you might have any thoughts on that, as to, in terms of, what shared mission do we have now that it's not so crystal clear?
Well, I think the shared mission is clear, but I can speak from a spiritual angle of vision, or sort of classic sociology of religion perspective. I think the question sort of asks for a classic sociology of religion perspective, to tell you the truth. But hold on a second, let's see what I have if I have something immediately to call up for you. Yeah. We're in what's called the post-charismatic stage. And it's interesting, I think we used to hear from sociologists, scholars of religious studies and so on, and they would speak what what their profession offered, perspectives they gained from their professional studies, and we would sort of toss it aside because it doesn't apply to us, because ISKCON is transcendental. It's not like anything else. And post Srila Prabhupada's departure, it appears that we're a textbook case of exactly what scholars would expect of a post-charismatic religious society. A charismatic religious, or it doesn't have to be religious, it can be a political group, or a freedom group, or something like that. But a charismatic group has a leader who inspires the faith and of his followers, and inspires them to give their lives for the cause, to follow him, dropping everything else. So you have Gandhi, you have Jesus, you have Martin Luther King, you have so many who just leave aside everything else to, or rather whose followers leave everything else aside to dedicate themselves to the cause. And that's what we had with Srila Prabhupada, not universally, by the way. There were people during Prabhupada's time who had their own mixed motives or their own separate agendas, who weren't that inspired really, or who struggled. But as on the whole, you'd say that that's what the society was about. We were people who were ready to put aside everything else, to live on, to sleep on the floor, to fly across the Atlantic in a tin can, and live in foreign countries and so on. So that's what we find in a charismatic group. Once the founder leaves, then things change, and you get, well, let's see if I can find it here. You get a series of dilemmas. I'm taking this from Thomas O'Day, who was writing in the 1960s. What happens is you go from being a sort of a spontaneous group, you started treading the road of institutionalization. And O'Day says that religion both needs most and suffers most from institutionalization. And he says, while institutionalization is necessary, it tends to change the character of the movement and to create certain dilemmas that all routinized religions face. Routinized, this is a term, the routinization of charisma, from sort of the spontaneous, you don't know what's going to happen next. You don't know what, are we flying to Peru? Are we all off to Zanzibar? Whatever it is. But in the routinization stage, you need things to be stable, you need things to be predictable, you need things to be rational, you need things to have some sort of system to them. You're no longer willing to just live in willy-nilly land. So you get routinization and institutionalization, where you get sort of sensible and normal rational systems for doing things. But here are the dilemmas. There's, first of all, the dilemma of mixed motivations. The movement starts with single-minded and unqualified devotion to the leader and his or her teachings, and all the kind of stuff that we just talked about. But with the development of a stable institutional structure, the desire to occupy the more creative, responsible, and prestigious positions can stimulate jealousies and personality conflicts. Concerns about personal security within the organization may cause members to lose sight of the group's primary goals. Mixed motivation occurs when a secondary concern or motivation comes to overshadow the original goals and teachings of the leader. Conventions of clergy sometimes debate pension plans and insurance programs more heatedly than statements of mission. So this is a dilemma, because the institution must, in fact, provide for the economic security and well-being of its people, especially full-time people. So you get this dilemma of mixed motives, which I think we could admit is something familiar to us. And my apologies here for not speaking from Srimad Bhagavatam or something directly inspirational, but I think I found this useful, and anyway, take it for what it is. Then there's the dilemma, the symbolic dilemma. The group needs a common set of symbols to express its worldview and ethos, but as the members project their subjective feelings onto those symbols or symbolic behaviors, things may come to the point where those symbols no longer carry meaning and power for them. Members may then feel apathy or even antagonism toward those symbols. Think Danda or Tilak or Dhoti. Do they have the same symbolic power as before? So the dilemma of symbols. Then there's the dilemma of administrative order. As the group grows into an institution, it may develop national offices and a bureaucratic structure. It establishes rational policies and regulations to clarify relationships between various statuses and offices. Things may become unwieldy and overcomplicated, too much red tape. And attempts to modify or reform the structure may run into severe resistance by those whose status and security in the hierarchy may be threatened. Resolution of the dilemma of administrative order may be impeded by the existence of mixed motivation. Many people within the hierarchy may view reorganization as a threat to their own security or positions of power and prestige. And again, that's a dilemma because you need effective administrative policies and structures. There's not too many more of these, and I don't want to overburden ourselves with mundane analysis, but I think if you're finding this useful, I'll keep going.
Yeah.
Okay. The dilemma of delimitation, defining the point versus substituting the letter for the spirit. As we institutionalize, the religious message is translated into specific guidelines for everyday life. The general teachings about the unity of the universe or about the love of God must be translated into concrete rules of ethical behavior. But again, it's a dilemma. The abstract moods, motivations, and concepts must be made concrete so that common lay people can comprehend their meaning and implication for everyday life. But later generations may become literalistic and legalistic about the rules and miss the central message. So that's a dilemma. Defining the point versus substituting the letter for the spirit.
Yeah. And who is this author, Maharaj?
This is Thomas O'Day. He's a Catholic, of course. I think he may have been a priest. I'm forgetting now, but it's a classic work on sociology of religion, published, I believe, in the 1960s.
It reminds me a little bit of Anton Boysen's Religion in Crisis and Custom that I heard about from Ravinder Swarup Prabhu.
Mm-hmm.
It's a similar analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just, as I'm reading these accounts of ISKCON in the early 1970s, it makes me think, well, where are we now? What do we do now?
Yeah. Well, let me give you one or two more, and then we can move on from this. The dilemma of power, conversion versus coercion. To stay together and sustain its common faith, the group must ensure conformity to its values and norms. Occasional deviations may not be threatening, but large-scale disregard of them becomes threatening. So most of the beliefs, values, and norms of the faith must be adhered to most of the time. In the early stages, most members stick to the rules out of loyalty to the charismatic leader or their personal mystical experience or some other strongly internalized reason. But later generations who have grown up within the religious organization may never have personally experienced anything that compelled them to accept the absolute authority of the faith in their own lives, or the authority of the religious hierarchy to interpret the faith. They may be inclined to challenge official interpretations. To maintain the integrity of the organization and ensure consensus in their basic worldview, religious organizations may resort to coercive methods of social control, loss of privileges, shunning, excommunication, and so on. This may sound familiar also.
Yeah.
Especially when you get to the next generation of devotees who are not just automatically sold on whatever is handed down. The dilemma of expansion, communalism versus rational structure. In the beginning, everyone knows everyone else, close sense of community, but as the group expands, the closeness starts to grow thin. The group has to develop rational structures and procedures for decision-making, which can undermine the sense of belonging, of community. So whereas people first committed themselves out of strong feelings, now you have to appeal to their commitment to the ideals or ideology, or to what's in it for them personally. What do I stand to gain? This would seem to play into the dilemma of mixed motivation in a very direct way. When the individual's commitment hinges in large part on the question, what's in it for me? The problem of mixed motivation has become a reality. Then some people get frustrated with the impersonality of highly bureaucratized religion. Some feel the need for closer interpersonal ties. Some chafe at what seems a lack of spontaneity and fellowship. When all the people no longer know one another, this in itself means a change in the group's character. The common member no longer knows what's going on in other parts of the organization. Some individuals or special groups gain almost autonomous control over their own area or department, and they may use that platform to influence the policies, budget allocations, and goals of the entire organization. Often, ordinary members don't even know who the leaders of their church's various divisions are, aren't fully aware of what policy decisions the church is making. Nonetheless, those policies are implemented with the aid of donations by local churches, while common members provide the financial support. An elite group of people, unknown to most, decide how to spend it. This can, of course, cause conflict, especially if the elite supports causes the laity oppose. So these are your dilemmas enumerated by Thomas O'Day, and I think we'd be willing to acknowledge that they're familiar to us by now. I'll stick with O'Day for a couple minutes more. He says, the process of institutionalization is a mixed blessing, or perhaps a necessary curse. The group needs to institutionalize, but as it does so, it runs into these problems that we've talked about. And avoiding these problems by avoiding institutionalization is simply not an option. How's all that?
Well, it reminds me of something, the conversation Prabhupada had with Giriraj Maharaj. He was asking Giriraj, how will this movement continue? And Maharaj said, well, if we chant our 16 rounds and follow our regulative principles. And Prabhupada said we need intelligence and management.
Yeah.
Right?
He said, we have to be sincere, Srila Prabhupada.
Mm-hmm.
And if I recall, then Prabhupada said sincerity and then intelligence and management. Yes.
Thank you for reading all those things.
So it is a challenge to it. It's sort of a new challenge. The old challenge is, how do we meet all these adventures? How do we live this adventurous life? But the, in the midst of the jungles of Juhu and so on. But now it becomes a different kind of jungle, the jungle of mixed motives, of coercive power versus a need for order and a need to develop a structure, but a need for spontaneity. All of these dilemmas that we've mentioned are challenges for us now. How do we keep the vitality of the institution? How do we keep the truth of the teachings? How do we live the truth of the teachings in the face of these dilemmas? That's the question we face. And not only we face, but every political, religious, social group at this stage of its development faces these things, provided it survives that long. So ISKCON can pat itself on the back, because very often what happens is the charismatic leader disappears and the group disappears with him. It was a nice party while it lasted, but now it's over, and everybody goes back to work or back to the pub or whatever it is. So ISKCON we know of various movements that were there in the 60s, started more or less at the same time as ISKCON, that simply collapsed and faded away. So whereas ISKCON has arguably grown and become well established and in so many ways increased, so it has survived that first stage, but the war is not over. There are other issues that play into this. I don't know how far we want to get this evening into a full hour of sociology of religion. Elsie Priya has her hand up, though.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Forgive me, I'll try to make this brief, but I had some technical situation and I might have missed something that was already discussed. And I am willing to accept that I may be biased, having grown up in Catholic Church. But I think as I'm thinking it over, you have somebody like Jesus Christ, who is accepted as God himself. He had some success during his mission, and then he got killed. And then after that, that's when Christianity really took off. Although some would say that really what caused Christianity to take off was Paul, and Jesus was not the catalyst for the actual spread of it. But I'm just wondering if you had any comment on that, because that's something that it went on for like 1,000 years, guns blazing, the Catholic Church. And
these dilemmas don't mean that you're out of the running or out of the picture. They're dilemmas, but they don't mean that everything's over or that your vitality is extinguished. Mm-hmm. But they are features that one now has to struggle with, or that one may struggle with. One may, hardly notice, depending on one's situation. But they're forces of considerable weight that affect the organization. And yes, a post-charismatic organization can become exceedingly successful. It can become exceedingly successful. And we have seen that in the Catholic Church and in other missionary organizations, whether it has a religious mission or some other mission. That's there, yes. Typically what you see, however, is that these mixed motives and the various things that people chafe at give rise to counter movements, reform movements, revitalization movements, and so on. In Islam, the dreaded by or hated Wahhabis, hated by the United States folks, were really, when you look at them, they were a reform movement. The Wahhab was saying, "Hey guys, you've lost that loving feeling. Let's get back on track." So it was that sort of a movement, and such are the movements that grow. Protestantism was another effort of a similar kind, and we've had in ISKCON various reform movements. The purity and effectiveness of which could be argued or disputed, but that they at least saw themselves in that mold as wanting as saying, "Hey, this isn't the organization we joined. It no longer represents what we thought we stood for. So let's get things back on track." And so they start a reform movement or revitalization movement, or what have you. Even if you look at it, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement is a reform movement. Once Hinduism became ossified and you could say corrupt or routinized to the point of dullness, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes and really shakes things up with his message of spontaneous love of Krishna. When things deteriorate again, Bhaktivinoda Thakur comes and says, "Wait a second, this sex religion of yours is not what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give us, or this religion of caste Goswamiism or of Nityananda Vangsha or Acharya Parivar, none of this stuff, Sahajas. This is not Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement." So he starts something new. And even Srila Prabhupada, he sees that the Gaudiya Math has sort of lost it, and so he starts something new. So this is what you find in the history of religious movements, which doesn't mean that, okay, now if we want to get anywhere, we have to sort of storm the GBC castle and then throw the bombs out and bring in a new era of truth and beauty and spiritual vitality. Because the other thing that history teaches you is that the new reform movement becomes the next bureaucracy, the next institution. So it's a continuing process.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk floating around Facebook of, getting rid of everybody and, because things aren't going the way they should. And I'm thinking, okay, well, who's going to replace them? And who's willing to do.
Well, I'm in favor of getting rid of everybody, literally. I think that would solve a lot of problems, but it's probably an overambitious project.
When you say everybody, what everybody?
I thought I said literally everybody.
Oh, you mean me too? Okay. Where will I go? What will I do? I'm not really doing much anyway, so.
Hare Krishna. I'm sorry.
Now, yes, Atina.
Haribo, I'm so sorry. I just joined a few minutes ago. So, what is this getting rid of everybody in reference to? And what's the question? Thank you. Without context, it's like we're annihilating the whole world. No, thank you.
Getting rid of everybody, I think, is sort of tangential remark. You can just let that one go. But we were talking about the development of spiritual groups once the founder leaves. And we were talking about it from the perspective of sociology of religion. That's what was going on. So I would suggest just hang in and you'll sort of get the drift of it as we go along. And if you miss something, it wasn't spiritually important anyway, so you can live without it.
Sounds
But
good. Thank you.
we can't go over the past half hour for you. Sorry.
Maharaj,
Is that right? Yes.
I would, if you're not against the idea, we kind of have an inside joke in our house. Like, sometimes devotees will visit us and then we'll start talking about this, that, and the other thing, that's what's going on in ISKCON. And then at the end of the conversation, we'll say, okay, now that we've solved the problems of ISKCON, what, as if our sitting around talking about it is going to do anything. But I was wondering if this would be something, not talking about the problems of ISKCON, but maybe sort of having some maybe dialogue over a few sessions of what we might envision for the future of ISKCON without delving into the problems so much, but just sort of having a more positive idea of what can happen and what is happening that's, maybe not circulating on Facebook and nobody really knows about except the people involved. What would you think about having those kinds of discussions maybe over 2 or 3 sessions? Just to inspire ourselves.
Well, I don't know that we're ready to block off. I don't know if we're ready to, if everyone wants to block off the next 2 or 3 sessions.
I'm just throwing it out as a suggestion.
But we can take up any or all of these topics, and as we go along, it is essentially a free forum.
Okay.
I'd like to put forward a thought, which is sort of my maybe digested. Knock something over, why don't you? Sort of my digested, tentative. I don't know if conclusion is overambitious word, but anyway, a takeaway, I guess, is what I can say from all of this, and that is that the real life of a spiritual institution, the real value, the real substance of a religious institution, or you could almost say any missionary group, but especially let's stick to spiritual groups. The real essence of it lies with its saints. The real essence of it lies with its saints. When you look at that we have a well-run organization or a badly run organization, or give it a 60 or give it a 70 or give it a 40 kind of organization. In the long run, that may count a lot less than being able to look at the lives of ideal people who held true to the values, to the core values of the mission, and whose lives are therefore inspiring and exemplary. I'm reminded of Srila Prabhupada saying, if just one person becomes a pure devotee of Krishna, I'll consider the whole thing a success. I'd consider the whole thing a success. So when we can look toward devotees who who've lived their lives serving Krishna in well, even just serving Krishna dutifully and honestly and sincerely. That's wonderful. And if you can look at some who've really stood out, who've shown in their shown like a lantern, who've shown in their devotion and in their life by their spiritual qualities, then you look at that and say, that's what I'm here for. You know, that's what I want to be, or that's what I want to have. And that makes the whole thing worth it. And, you know, I have my personal favorites, the people that I would call out and say, you know, these are some of the saints that we had the good fortune to meet or to even to hear of. And if you have such people, then that matters more in the long run than this decision or this controversy or that controversy or this vote or that vote or this policy or that policy. Not that those things don't matter. Not that the people who are sincerely working on those things are wasting their time. But ultimately, that pure devotion, that spirit of pure devotion to Krishna. And well, if we can even see not only the spirit, but you see that combined with people who really do something, because Prabhupada said devotional service is practical activity in the service of Krishna. So when you see someone who really does things, and at the same time is pure, is inspiring, then you say, wow, that's what we're here for. So I look at that. And it may show up in different ways. In some, it may be extraordinary scholarship that, you know, with all sorts of insights into the philosophy, into the qualities or pastimes of Krishna. In some other field, it might be those who are humbly serving. It's you know, a pure mood. Someplace else, it might be absolute dedication to distributing books or to accomplishing some other purpose that Prabhupada wanted. But, you know, they crossed the finish line in such a way that you say, that was a life. And if I could have that kind of life, I would consider myself fortunate. I think if we have that, it's wonderful. And then to the extent that we can give that to others, it may be, you know, not that everybody becomes a super saint, but if people are making progress, if they're coming closer to Krishna, then you say, well, you know, we're accomplishing something. We're moving forward. Tattva said, the spiritual teacher is by nature a reformer, isn't he? Reforming for purification, reforming the aspiring disciples, the society, and so on. Yeah, I think that's true. There's a kind of, certainly it's a reform. And of course, reform may take different forms. So a reform may have to do with, you know, individual reformation of disciples, purification of heart, and so on. Or reform may have to do with, you know, policy and the institutional direction. Both of them are possible. To put it another way, inspiring reform in others. Yes, so that, again, it's the spiritual essence. It's the purifying our own hearts or purifying our own lives. Again, not just purification of heart, but purification of our activities, of our life, of what we do. That example of mind and words and body engaged in the service of Krishna. That's ultimately what we're here for. Some other thoughts about these topics? I also find, by the way, that this, and I don't know if it'll be the same for you, but I found that having these mundane insights provided by scholars like Dr. O'Day enables us to sort of take a long view of things, to be less disturbed by the great events of on Facebook today, or the great controversies that absolutely demand our attention, because we can see them in the larger context of the development of a spiritual organization. Sort of like, with kids, that at 8 they're going to be like this, and at 12 they're going to be like this, and at 14 they're going to be like that, and there may be some differences. There may be serious differences, but there's certain norms also. There's certain expectations that you can pretty much bet on in the development of a child, let's say. And of course, there are all sorts of unexpected and weird things too. That's also there. But having that understanding that, at 2, the child is going to be like this, at 4, at 8, it enables you to sort of say, well, that's par for the and less.
Your connection is getting interrupted, Maharaj. I'm not sure if there's anything you can do about it, but you're frozen right now. It's not just on my end, Panchatattva Prabhu, it's also for you? Yeah, okay. Yeah, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Oh, sorry we lost him.
I was thinking of this kind in comparison with the Gaudiya Math, and we look back, and if you like read the Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhava or any such books, you realize there were a lot of spiritual luminaries in the Gaudiya Math. It wasn't like a boatload of neophytes. There were some really, really advanced devotees, and they still managed to disintegrate. So it's a miracle that ISKCON has managed to continue, in light of that history. It's certainly a good thing.
Yeah, I hope Maharaj gets back on track. But Panchatattva Prabhu,
Everybody hopes I'll get back on track, but it's kind of late in the game for it now. But
hi.
yeah, my Zoom client just totally crashed.
Okay.
So I switched device. Sounds like things were going on better without me.
Yeah, we were doing our best. I think since maybe your connection was interrupted, maybe also your continuity in the chat window similarly was interrupted. But Mina posted a question, which I'll read in case it's not available to you there. She asks, do the dilemmas, in other words, the ones you were bringing up, do the dilemmas get resolved? And is there another phase of development after that these scholars present?
As far as I've read, they don't get resolved in the sense of, okay, now we've gone through that, and so things are going to settle down. What we hear is that these reform movements kick. What you expect is that the movement becomes like dull, routine, just another church, people going, sincerely doing the things they're doing, but without a lot of life to it. Like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said about the Tattvavadis, that, there's just no love down here. There's, you're worshiping Narayan, but beyond that, it's pretty dull stuff. I don't see that kind of spontaneous love that we're looking for. So it may take thousands of years, or things may go off sooner, but that can kick in, or some sort of major deviation can kick in also, where things go way off course. But assuming they don't do that, then you just kind of plod along. At first you've got a lot of energy, and that may last for hundreds, thousands of years. But gradually, the world, even Krishna, yada yada hi dharmasya glani bhavati bharata, religion starts to wane, and I have to kickstart it again. So I come yuge in every age to get things back, running again. So that's typically what they say happens. Things get dull, or things go off course. The mixed motives become really mixed, and the material considerations start to cover the spiritual substance. People now, it's more of a religion. First, this is not a religion. This is a revolutionary spiritual movement. Then later, it's a bona fide religion, and later it's one of many religions, and so on. What's your religion? Well, I'm a Hare Krishna. Okay. What's your favorite kind of beer? Well, so that's what you can expect. But then these revolutions come along, revolutionary movements, renewal movements, and they may be considered heretical, or they may be what's the word, deprecated, criticized. But they inject new life in, if you've got the real thing, if they're led by genuine people, who are properly guided, and it gets things back on course, as Prabhupada, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur, as Srila Prabhupada revitalized Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement. So that's where you don't, it's not that the forces within sort of just gradually bring things to.
Cut out again, Maharaj.
Yeah, now your new connection has gotten disconnected, unfortunately. Hare Krishna. Yeah, your transmission's temporarily frozen.
Am I back?
Yes,
Well,
yes, we're back.
Well, hallelujah.
Hare Krishna. Tulsi Priya posted a question, if unless you wanted to continue.
No, I think you got it right, what I was saying. I
Yeah.
repeated it too many times.
No, she was asking, where does the concept of the golden age of Lord Chaitanya come from that's supposed to last for 10,000 years?
I'm not sure, to tell you the truth. It comes somewhere from Shastra, or from Chaitanya literature, but I don't know where.
It's a research project.
But if we got 10,000, that's the renewal movement at the end of Kali Yuga, that Kalki comes and just wipes everybody out and says, let's start again. The ultimate renewal.
So you get your wish, Maharaj. You get rid of everybody.
Jai. Thank
Hare Krishna.
Well, I hope this has been useful, and hasn't been too think of it as being, for me, I've found it to be sort of helpful, mundane knowledge that gives me a perspective and encourage me to go on chanting Hare Krishna and not be all that troubled by the inevitable and wonderful things are possible. It's not that because of some sort of timeline or chart in the in a sociology book, one can't do something extraordinary or wonderful or inspiring or pure. There's room for so many wonderful contributions, and again, so I see it in terms of the lives of saintly people who do wonderful things, including the sort of routine work of saying, okay, let's keep this institution strong, let's keep it on course, let's keep it faithful to the founders' wishes. They may have different opinions about how to do that or what that consists of, but they're seriously dedicating themselves. It's not that we say, well, they weren't really saintly people; they were bureaucrats. They also may be working in so it's really divides. Oh, we don't do that. We're sadhus, so we just chant Hare Krishna purely, while these poor second-class people do work. We go for samadhi while they just plod along doing karma. That's really yeah. I missed something flashed across my screen. I couldn't read it, but it reminded me anyway that whole Kheturi festival was like a renewal movement where John Mata was there and the Gaudiya Vaishnavas all got together, and it created a wave of renewed inspiration among the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. It doesn't have to be breakaway schismatic movement or something. Kheturi festival. So that these things also, and we may have sort of mini versions. We may have retreats and workshops and things like that, where sanghas and so on, where devotees get inspiration, or where devotees give inspiration to others. So all of these things have a role to play. And with that, we're at 8 o'clock. We have a couple minutes just for a little kirtan, just to blow away the tinge of mundane sociological bhav from the mirror of the mind.
Sure. Panchatattva Prabhu, your fans are requesting you to lead kirtan.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
I posted something, just wanted to mention if it's possible, that I found a Vyas Puj homage from 1990, I think it was from Fiji, where they mentioned Lochandas Thakur mentions in his Chaitanya Mangala that Nityananda Prabhu, while speaking to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, said that a great Senapati, commander-in-chief, will come to earth and start the golden age. His instructions will guide the golden age for 10,000 years.
Thank you. Research project completed.
At least partially.
Jai.
Thanks to the devotees.
Well, do a little kirtan and you'll complete the project. If you would.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Jai. Jayadvaita
Jai.
Maharaj ki jai.
ki jai. Gaur
Thank you.
Premanande.
Hari Hari Bol.
Haribol.